Many words we use regularly in English are actually borrowed from the Spanish language. That makes life a lot easier for you if you're a Spanish speaker. We'll speak about some of them today and explain how to pronounce them correctly in English. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hello and welcome. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And with nearly 50 years of helping Spanish speakers improve their English, we're going to help you take your English to the next level. How are you, Reza?
I'm fine, Craig. I'm feeling very well. I'm looking forward to recording this podcast. And you?
Me too. I'm raring to go, my friend. Raring to go. Tengo ganas de empezar. First, we have a message from Carlos, who is otherwise known as Charlie, from Mexico, who is currently living in Canada. So let's hear what Carlos has to say.
Hi friends, I am Carlos, but here everybody calls me Charlie. I am a new listener. I am Mexican, but currently living in Summerland, BC in Canada. Have you been here before? I've been working for 2 years in a cherry orchard. We are about to start the winter pruning. Well, as you know, we love your podcast because we can improve our English, and in addition, we are learning about general culture. So I have a suggestion to you. Why you don't speak about agriculture, farms, how the trees growing up, why the winter is important, the work that the bees do. Perhaps you can name the episode From the Orchard to Your Table. Well, that's all. Thank you, friends, and take care.
Thank you very much, Charlie. I bet it's getting really cold over there in Canada, picking cherries, cerezas, cherries, in a cherry orchard, and just about to start the winter pruning. Now, to prune, Prune, means to cut the branches of a tree so that it grows stronger. To cut the branches is pruning. So Charlie is about to begin the winter pruning up there in Canada, which I imagine is very different from Mexican weather this time of year.
Yes, and I don't know whether I should envy you or not, because it's probably back-breaking work. It sounds like hard work, collecting cherries and pruning the plants. But cherry orchards are beautiful places. I know this from my time when I lived in Extremadura, in Cáceres. In the north of Cáceres, in the Valle de Jerte, is the most famous cherry-producing area of Spain. And to see the cherry trees in bloom is beautiful. They're very, very beautiful cherry orchards.
Lovely, lovely colours. And when Carlos or Charlie spoke about the trees, he said how the trees are growing up. We don't use the phrasal verb to grow up when we speak about trees and plants. Trees and plants grow and people grow up. Remember, grow is an irregular verb, so I grew up in London, Reza grew up in Belfast, but trees grow.
I think you made a little mistake with another preposition. You said a suggestion to you. No, you have a suggestion for a person, a suggestion for you, Charlie.
And you asked us to speak a little about farming, about agriculture. We have done that. If you go to episode 155, Charlie, so inglespodcast.com/155, that episode is all about farming and agriculture. If there is something we didn't speak about in that episode, or you have questions, let us know and we'll comment on that in the future. And we did an episode on Canada, didn't we, Reza? Charlie might be interested in that.
Yeah, I don't know if you've already listened to it, Charlie. We did an episode quite a long time ago. It's episode 224. So if you go to inglespodcast.com/224, that episode was dedicated entirely to Canada.
So now we're going from Canada to a country that doesn't have quite such a severe winter. We're going to Brazil and we'll listen to a voice message from Marlon.
Hello, Rezan and Greg. I'm Marlon from Brazil. I'm originally from Rio de Janeiro, but I've lived in São Paulo since 2018. In the beginning of the year, I was looking for an English podcast on Spotify, and I'm so glad that I found you guys. I often listen to you while I'm working out, and I try to listen to the episode twice to make sure I understand what are you saying. I'm sure that your wonderful work is helping me to get to another level. So thank you and keep doing this necessary job. I studied English only for 3 years when I was in college, and after that I didn't take class anymore, just studying on my own. And unfortunately, I don't have to use English in my day, whether at work or at home. And I feel like I can't improve my English anymore if I don't have anyone to talk frequently. So I have followed some of your tips like the chat box, which is a Facebook group with several videos, conversations about a lot of subjects, and I enjoy it a lot. And I test my pronunciation with the word from Google. That was a tip from you too. And I was wonder if you have an advice on another way to improve my pronunciation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marlon, for taking the time to send us in your voice message. I was very, very impressed at the level of your English. You said that you only studied English for 2 years at college, formally, and since then you've been studying by yourself. I think you're doing really, really well. Your message was very clear. I understood what you said. I think your pronunciation is good, and it was impressive, wasn't it, Reza?
Yes, Marlon, your pronunciation is already very good. So is your grammar and vocabulary. I guess there's always room for improvement. Yep, it's good that you want to improve, but you're doing well so far. However, we can, as ever, find a few little things to improve with all our audio messages. Craig, did you notice anything that could be improved?
Yes, Marlon, you said I listen twice to understand what are you saying. What are you saying is the order for asking a question. What are you saying? Could be a question. But I listen twice to understand what you are saying will be the correct order for a statement. I listen twice to understand what you are saying.
Yes, another little thing we could correct is this, Marlon. You said, I was wondering. We need ing here because if you use auxiliary verb was, it's a past continuous, and continuous always have ing. So I was wondering if you had an advice, you said. Well, I understand what you're saying. That's a typical mistake which Spanish speakers make, and I guess maybe Portuguese speakers as well. But advice in English is uncountable. So you have to say, if you had some advice in English, you can't say 1 or 2 or 3. You could say a piece of advice, but it's just much easier to say if you had some advice.
And I really like the fact that you're using our advice and you're practicing with things that we are mentioning on the podcast, and as a result you're improving your English. So you've got that curiosity and that appetite, that hunger to improve your English by yourself, which is really, we say in English, half the battle. If it's half the battle, then you're doing almost everything you need just by having that curiosity and that desire to improve your English. So well done. And Reza mentioned pieces of advice. Now, the idea of pieces, we can also say chunks. If you focus on short chunks or pieces of language, trozos in Spanish, then that will improve your pronunciation. So you'd listen and repeat after us or after any native speaker, listening to chunks of language and focusing on chunks of language. And there's an example there. I said focus. Many Spanish speakers mispronounce that word focus. And when it's followed by a preposition, on, those two sounds connect. Focus on, focus on. Another example, chunks of. Chunks, trozos, of, the preposition. The sound of changes to of. Chunks of. Focus on chunks of language.
Another way you could practice is by following some YouTube channels. For example, MMM English. That's 3 M's. MMM English.
English, she says.
English.
English.
Also, Accents Way English with, is it pronounced Hadar or Hadar?
Hadar.
With Hadar. Okay, sorry. Accents Way English with Hadar. Or English with Lucy. And also, Learn English with Papa Teach Me.
All of those YouTube channels have a focus on pronunciation, so I'd recommend you go there, Marlon, and find the videos that focus on pronunciation. I think that will help you with things like individual sounds as well, like cup and put. Both of those words have the U, the letter U, but with different pronunciation. Cup is a and put is u. The same letter, but two different pronunciations. So those are examples of things that you can find on YouTube. And I've put a list of these YouTube channels in the show notes to this episode. So go to inglespodcast.com/346.
Another good way to practice is using the material from the Mansión Inglés. If you go to store, S-T-O-R-E, .mansioningles.net, you will find that there's an English pronunciation for Spanish speakers, an ebook course for the very small fee of €12. Maybe the easiest thing to do, Marlon, and all those interested, is just have a look at the show notes, and we've got this specific link which will take you directly to that English pronunciation for Spanish speakers ebook course which we've mentioned.
And in that course, you'll see help with word stress, silent letters in English, the different vowel sounds, as I said before, with words like cup and put, problem words like comfortable, recipe, receipt, things that are difficult for Spanish speakers to say. Another one is crisps, papas. So many different aspects of pronunciation can be found in that pronunciation course on the Mansión Inglés website. So the idea for this episode, words in English that come from Spanish, thank you very much to Charlie Gear for this idea. He can be found on Twitter at Amerizano. And Charlie suggested this week's topic. Now, Charlie is based in Jerez in Andalusia, although he originally comes from South Carolina in the US. And I recommend you follow him as well. He's quite active on Twitter, on Facebook. He has a lovely sense of humour, and he has a very deep interest in the English language. He loves language. So go and find Charlie Gear on Twitter and Facebook.
And he's in a place, Jerez, or Jerez, some people might say Jerez, which has very long-standing and an important connection with the British because, of course, it gives us sherry. So you call the drink in Spanish the same as the place, Jerez, but we call it sherry, S-H-E-R-R-Y, and of course sherry, real sherry, can only be made in Jerez, and it was actually invented for the British. Although Spanish people drink sherry as well, but they invented it to be able to export wine without it going bad to the UK.
And don't confuse the word sherry with an S with cherry with a C, which is what Carlos is picking up there in Canada.
Yes, our other Charlie. We got two Charlies on the show.
So if you want to look at some Spanish words that we do not have in English, so today we're looking at Spanish words that we do use in English, but the opposite, words that maybe we need to have in English, words like cachondea, guiri, and funcionario, that are difficult to translate, go to inglespodcast.com/127, where you can find an episode we did on some words we do need in English. But let's look at some commonly used words in English that have Spanish roots or a Spanish connection.
And some of these words are exactly the same as Spanish. They're just the Spanish word, and we've taken it into English. But sometimes we change the pronunciation. That's the thing. So it could be exactly the same spelling, exactly the same word, but sometimes we pronounce it our way.
An obvious place to start is places and place names and names of states in the US and cities. For example, we have Colorado, which is a state in the United States of America. There's also Montana from mountain, and we have spoken about these names before, haven't we, Reza?
Yes, we went into detail, actually, a little bit more detail on specific place names in the episode on history of American English. That was 335. So if you go to inglespodcast.com/335, there we actually explain what these words mean. Some of them are from Spanish, but some of them we've also included some which are not Spanish. Words like Mississippi, Massachusetts, which are other languages. So you'll find a mixture of Spanish and non-Spanish American place names explained in that episode.
One place name that I don't think we mentioned, and I was surprised to learn this, Las Vegas. Vega, I did not know means the meadows, a fertile plain or rich lowland area. Did you know that?
Yep, that's quite an important word in Spanish, Las Vegas, yeah.
Vegas, okay.
Of course, let's not forget the City of Angels, Los Angeles, as we say. You see, already we're talking about pronunciation not being the same. Los Angeles, but in English, Los Angeles. San Francisco, if you're Spanish, but San Francisco, if you're an English speaker.
And then Cuba, Mexico, Argentina are all from Spanish origins, and almost all from Latin America.
But for our Brazilian listeners, including Marlon, we know not all of Latin America. Brazil, no. Okay, Brazil is Portuguese. We got that. But most of the rest of Latin America, the place names, the countries, obviously, we've kept them in English the same as the Spanish.
So obviously place names is a big one, but let's look at some individual words and vocabulary that also we have taken from the Spanish language. Breeze, B-R-E-E-Z-E. Breeze is from the Spanish brisa. So we'd say brisa del mar, which is a sea breeze, something that we enjoy here in Valencia fairly often. A lovely sea breeze.
Another thing which some people enjoy, although other people hate, depending on the way you look at it, and the Spanish brought us not only the word, but the actual substance to Europe from the New World, is tobacco. So it's very similar in many languages, I imagine. I think it's tabac, isn't it? In French, tabac, something like that. In English, T-O-B-A-C-C-O, tobacco, is our pronunciation of your word, of course, which is tobacco. So in English, tobacco. And related words. Cigar, we say, for you is un puro. And cigarette is un cigarro or cigarrillo.
Although I've always found it strange when a Spanish person would use the word tobacco in Spanish when what they really mean is a packet of cigarettes, because in British English we might say, have you got a cigarette, or do you sell cigarettes here, or I'm going to buy a pack of cigarettes, whereas in Spanish they'd use tobacco. ¿Tienes tabaco? Voy a comprar tabaco. Different translation, but we know what tobacco means. It's very similar.
Another word, which is very important, is the word cargo. Now this is a weird one because you also have a Spanish word cargo, but our word cargo doesn't come from your noun cargo. It comes from your noun carga. Una carga. Let me explain. What is cargo in English?
My car goes very well. Is that the meaning?
No.
How does your car go?
Craig's playing with words there. He's using the word car and the verb to go. But no, I'm talking about when it's all together, a cargo. So what is a cargo? It's goods, products, objects that are transported through ship, aircraft, or any motor vehicle, a cargo. But of course, in Spanish, that's carga. Typical giddy mistake. I used to say that mistake and say, oh, el cargo del barco. But it's wrong, isn't it? It's la carga del barco. So cargo comes from carga. But strangely, you do have another word in Spanish, which is cargo. El cargo de mi tío is his job.
Ah.
El cargo de alguien in Spanish is a job.
Yep.
But a cargo in English comes from the Spanish word carga, which is a load, curiously.
Confusing as well.
Very confusing.
Going to sea vocabulary, we have in English the words armada and flotilla, and galleon, which is a big Spanish ship. Although with those words, I'd probably put the word Spanish before. I'd say the Spanish armada, a Spanish galleon.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a Spanish armada. I mean, yeah, when we talk about the armada, we understand the Spanish Armada. But you could say that, it looks like there's going to be a war. The Americans have put together a huge armada in the South Pacific. It doesn't have to be the Spanish, right? The same for flotilla. A flotilla is like part of an armada, right? Various flotillas can
Group
make up
of ships.
an armada.
Yeah, that's very true. A mountain range in Spanish is Sierra, and we use Sierra also in English. There's famously the Ford Sierra, which is a make of car. And I had some time this morning. I looked at some funny names that have been given to cars apart from the Ford Sierra. There's the Chevrolet Nova, which is Nova, doesn't go, Nova. There's the Mazda La Puta.
No way.
Yes, check it on internet.
We won't even translate that.
We won't translate the Mazda La Puta. There's the Mitsubishi Pajero.
Yes, we won't translate that.
We won't translate that. And there's the Nissan Moco.
Really?
M-O-C-O, which you could buy in green.
Oh dear. So you can get a bit of mucus, a snot, maybe in English. S-N-O-T, a snot.
A snotty car, a Nissan Moco. Yeah. So some funny car names there. But of course,
My dad drove a curtain.
a Cortina.
Yeah. Very popular
of
car.
course, the
He
Ford
drove a curtain.
Cortina.
Sounds so crap. Crap is muy malísimo, o sea, patético. In Spain, you wouldn't say, sí, un coche. ¿Qué le vamos a llamar? Cortina? Why would you call a car a curtain? But in English, it sounds okay. Yeah, I got a Cortina.
Was it called the Cortina because you had to keep pulling it together? Embargo is another word taken from Spanish, and we might be hearing that word more next year as we go into 2021 at the time of recording this, because there might be some trade embargoes on the UK. So we use the word embargo quite commonly in English.
A very important word to people in the United States. I'm not sure about South Carolina, where Charlie's from, but certainly further south in Texas and places like that, the ranch. Home on the ranch. Back to the ranch. See you back at the ranch. El rancho, of course, in Spanish. So we just got rid of the final O and we made it ranch. So it's a big farm where people have livestock, animal and crops, etc.
Did you notice how Reza's pronunciation changed as he had an American pronunciation of ranch? So it's a more open sound, ranch. Whereas where I'm from, in the south of the UK, we'd probably say ranch. Ranch and ranch.
And I've just thought, it's just occurred to me now, a person who works on a ranch, I'm sure in Mexico and places like that, the first Charlie can clarify this, you refer to a ranchero. And in the south of the United States, a rancher.
Yeah.
So we just got rid of the O again. Ranchero, rancher.
True. Here's a question for you. There are two insects, Reza. There's a mosquito, a little fly, mosquito, and a cockroach, cucaracha. Which do you hate more, a mosquito or a cockroach?
Oh, I hate them both so much. It's hard to decide, but I guess more mosquito.
I hate cockroaches more. I would rather have a mosquito in the room than a cockroach.
Oh, you're crazy. Well, only a couple of weeks ago, and yes, as we said, it is the end of December. A couple of weeks ago, I was bitten by a mosquito. Yep. Even in this cold weather, sometimes they get into room. I know I was bitten by it because I heard it. It woke me up, went to the toilet, had an itch on my face, had a look at it, had bitten me. Even in December, so I hate mosquitoes, I'm sorry. Cockroaches don't bite you, Craig.
No, they just get up on your bed and crawl on your pillow. Yeah. Coco, are we speaking about your dog, Coco?
Not Coco the dog, and he's C-O-C-O, so he's named after... So he's named after the coconut tree.
Ah, not cocoa like in chocolate, the cocoa plant.
This is a big false friend connection in Spanish. So in English, a hard brown fruit from a tree is a coconut, but Craig is far more interested in COCOA because, well, why are you so interested in cocoa?
Because you use cocoa to make my favourite food, which is chocolate. Careful of the pronunciation, only 2 syllables in chocolate, and the first syllable is stronger. So 2 syllables, chocolate, chocolate.
2 lovely things that the Spanish brought over from the New World, from the Americas. But did you know that the word chocolate, which we've taken from Spanish, was not invented by the Spanish?
Yes, I did know that. Where does it come from?
Well, they got it from another language, so obviously it already existed in Central and South America before they arrived. So from the Nahuatl language, they had a similar word, not exactly chocolate or chocolate, but something which sounds similar, and the Spanish adapted that to sound Spanish, chocolate, and then we adopted it to English to sound English, chocolate, and the French adopted it to chocolat, etc. But it was Nahuatl language. So this is quite common, that English borrows from Spanish, but the Spanish originally borrowed it from another language like Nahuatl. This passing on borrowing is very, very common.
Can you think of another word that's borrowed from Nahuatl?
Plenty, because the Spanish got so many words from there. Coyote. Coyote, the animal, exactly the same in English. That's from Nahuatl. Or here's a word which isn't Nahuatl, but it's from another South American language. A puma in English, or puma, you would say. We would say puma. And that's originally Quechua. So from Quechua to Spanish to English, and probably a few other languages as well.
Another word that we would possibly use in English is macho. A macho person, he's very macho, he's very manly, although possibly in a negative way. I hear in Spanish people using macho as a synonym for mate. They might say in very informal English, "Hey, ¿qué piensas, macho?" or "Qué bien verte, macho?" Whereas in English we wouldn't use it in that way, and I don't know if you agree, but generally it has negative connotations. If you call a man, if a man is accused of being macho, that's not necessarily a positive quality.
Yeah, he's a macho man. He's a funny character. He exaggerates his manliness, and it's a bit ridiculous. He thinks he's more manly than he really is, or than is normal.
He's not in touch with his feelings.
Another type of man which I envy, which I'd like to be, but I'm not, is a Don Juan. Yes, we use that expression in English. Notice my pronunciation. I'm going to say it in English. He's a Don Juan, because that's how we say it. But of course, it's Don Juan, isn't it?
Don Juan.
Don Juan, that famous literary character who was a womanizer. He was extremely successful with women, and we've adopted that word into English, a Don Juan.
Words for dances, obviously, we use also in English, like the tango, the salsa, and the rumba. Very much part of the English language in a similar way as maybe paella or tapas. We'd use them in everyday conversation. Also words like siesta we might use, or fiesta for holiday. So definitely those dances, the salsa, the rumba, and the tango, we use on a daily basis.
Another word, sadly, you hear mentioned a lot, I say sadly because it tends to have negative connotations, is the word gorilla.
Like the big monkey.
I'm not talking about the big monkey, but it sounds the same, doesn't it? If I write it Guerrilla, you Spanish speakers are thinking, oh, guerrilla, okay. But in English, pronounced gorilla. The same pronunciation as the animal, but different spelling. You got the same word in Spanish, but be careful. It's not exactly the same part of speech as Spanish. La guerrilla in Spanish could be like the force which fights in a little war, una guerrilla. But in Spanish, that is one thing, but in English, it's actually a person. So if I say he was a guerrilla, in Spanish it would be era un guerrillero. So slightly different, but we use that for the actual person in English. Or it can be an adjective, a guerrilla war. Not a war with monkeys. A guerrilla war is a war where guerrillas, guerrilleros, fight. So be careful about the different parts of speech being different words in English and Spanish.
I've just watched the latest Planet of the Apes movie, so I could say that there were gorillas fighting a guerrilla war. Yeah. Guerrilla fighters.
Yeah, you could, yeah. I've just thought of another good example of how English doesn't observe Spanish rules of parts of speech. What do you call somebody from the Philippines, Craig?
Filipino.
Spanish word, Filipino. Mm-hmm. And if it's a woman, what do you call them in English?
The same, a Filipino.
There's no word Filipina in English.
No.
So you say correctly in English, she is Filipino. That's correct English. If you say Filipina, people will say, what's a Filipina? I've never heard that word. You have to say she's a Filipino. So obviously in Spanish, that's nonsense. Feminine, masculine. But in English, we got the word Filipino, and there's no other variation, and it means a man or a woman from the Philippines. So sometimes we don't observe your rules of grammar, but we take your words.
And going back to food, we've spoken about chocolate and cocoa. We took the word aguacate and changed it to avocado. So avocado is borrowed from Spanish, and of course, things you make from avocados like guacamole, for example. So guacamole is pretty much the same with a slight difference in pronunciation. Guacamole.
Another nice thing to eat is barbecued food. The word barbecue is our English derivation of your word barbacoa, so we adapted it. Another word is cafeteria. I know you say cafeteria in Spanish, different stress. You put the stress in cafeteria on the fourth syllable, but in English we say cafeteria. We put it on the third syllable.
And what's interesting that there are different things if you change the pronunciation and put an accent over the E when you shorten cafeteria, because a caf, C-A-F-E, reminds me of a place where you might get a mug of tea and a bacon sandwich and a good English fried breakfast with tomato sauce on the table. That's a caf. Very popular with lorry drivers. However, a cafe with the accent on the E reminds me of coffee and very nice cakes.
Craig says it's a calf in the south of England, but it's not in Scotland or Ireland.
What is it there?
We never say calf. I know it's a very southeast of England. We would always say cafe, but I know that many people in the south of England say, hey, let's have a drink in the calf, but we never say that in Ireland or Scotland.
So let's be clear. So if you want a traditional Irish breakfast and you go to one of those cheap motorway places where you can have fried egg, fried sausages, bacon, blah, 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 what do you call it?
Motorway cafe. We don't use the word calf in that sense. It's a very English south of England
Interesting.
thing. Americans don't either. Americans don't say calf.
No.
Have you noticed that?
Yep.
So it's specific to, I'm not sure, but I don't even think they use it in the north of England, eh? For me, it makes me, when I hear the word calf, sorry for the, I'm about to really cliche now, Craig's going to laugh at this. It's like, oh, you see it there in the calf. It's EastEnders. It's an EastEnders show. only EastEnders say calf. In Ireland and Scotland, we don't pronounce it calf. We use the word, but we always pronounce it cafe. But in the south of England, they sometimes pronounce cafe calf. Curious, right?
That's something I've learned today. I had no idea. Another thing I learned doing research for this, bodega. In Spanish, I was checking two words for bodega. One is cellar, C-E-L-L-A-R, and the other is basement, B-A-S-E-M-E-N-T, which you could use for places to store wine. Is that what you understand from bodega, or do you understand something different?
For me, it's a place where you store wine or similar things, or maybe sherry from Jerez, or that type of thing. But not beer, not that type of thing, for wine and wine-based products.
So would you use either of those words to translate bodega, cellar or basement? And what's the difference between them?
Well, I wouldn't say the word basement unless I added something like a basement where I store my wine, because a basement could be to store anything.
Right.
But in Spanish, I know una bodega can be for wine or it can be for anything you like. But in English, bodega is specifically only for wine or wine-based products, right?
And I think that's the way we would use it in English. If we use the word bodega, we would use it as a place that sold wine that's not necessarily under the ground. It could just be a shop.
Could be.
That sold wine or spirits.
But you wouldn't use it for the typical average kind of shop that you find on a typical British high street to buy alcohol. The typical word for that is off license. Yeah, bodega is specifically, it's going to be old-fashioned. Yeah, it's going to be for wine or that type of thing. You don't go into a bodega to get a tin of cider. No.
Correct. Right. And to go further with those two words, cellar and basement, both are below ground level. The cellar is more commonly used for storing things, like as an almacén, for storage, which is often wine, but not necessarily. And a basement is more likely to be a living space, whereas a cellar probably isn't. And also a basement is often bigger. And when you go to department stores, you often see bargain basement, for example, which is a big area of the supermarket below the ground where you can find bargain products and things like that.
Craig, what do you understand in English by the word patio?
Patio will be an open area at ground level, so not a balcony, would probably be on the ground attached to a house. So a similar word could be courtyard in English. Courtyard, a courtyard.
But you definitely wouldn't think of a schoolyard, would you?
No.
Whereas in Spanish, it can have that meaning. El patio donde juegan los niños en el colegio, that's not patio in English, that's schoolyard. So if it's a big space like that, we don't say patio.
It reminds me of a place where maybe there's trees and shade in the summer where you can sit in the afternoon and have a siesta. It's nice and cool. That would be a patio.
What's a plaza?
A plaza, which we take from the Spanish word plaza, Plaza, a public area in the form of a building with shops and stores. So let's go to the plaza to watch a film. Maybe there's a cinema there.
So more than just the actual square, it'll have things around it. It'll have shops and things.
And businesses, yeah, definitely. And as I said before, some words in Spanish we'd use in everyday conversation. I can say that after lunch I like to take a nap, N-A-P. Or I could use the Spanish word siesta because most English speakers know what a siesta is. So siesta is a word that's very much part of the English language now. And similarly, pronto, P-R-O-N-T-O. For example, I'll do it pronto. Yeah, pronto, I'll do it pronto. I'll do it soon. You might hear that. And nada as well. It means nothing, nada. So very often we'd use nada in English because people know what that means.
Who's we? You say we'd use it in English.
More in American English.
I was going to say I would because I speak Spanglish as well. But do you know many people in London who'd say it?
I think it's more used in American English, but I hear it on podcasts all the time. Those three words together. Nothing, zip, nada. Those three words together in that order is a very common expression. I think you might hear it in the UK, but you definitely hear it regularly in America. Oh, this guy, he's completely ignorant. He doesn't know anything. He knows nothing. Zip, nada.
Craig, how would you say in Spanish, a little donkey?
Burrito.
Ah, and what else could that be?
It could be something that you would eat. I don't think you'd put a little donkey on a fire, but you might make a burrito with some meat and some vegetables, some hot sauce. Yeah, lovely burritos.
Can you think of any other words which are similar to burrito?
Tacos, enchiladas, fajitas. I think these are really common, especially in American English because of the proximity to Mexico and other Latin American countries that eat similar food. Don't think they're as common in the UK, but definitely very, very much in the American English vocabulary.
What about the word silo? How would you say that in Spanish? A silo, a place for storing grain, seeds, that type of thing. A farmer might use a silo. Do you know how to say that in Spanish?
I don't. I know it's a large, round kind of tower. What's the Spanish word?
Silo.
Okay.
It's written exactly the same. We stole it from Spanish. So, un silo has become in English a silo. Yeah.
And you use it to store grain or food, yeah?
Yeah, and it's exactly the same meaning in Spanish, but we changed the pronunciation.
Rodeo is a commonly used word in English. I'd love to see a rodeo. That's one thing I haven't done yet. Have you seen a rodeo?
No, but I'd like to. Yeah, it
Be
sounds
fun.
interesting. I'd like to see how they lasso the animal. What's lasso?
Lazo in Spanish. Lasso is the English spelling. And I think we mentioned these words like lasso, buckaroo, in the episode we did on cowboys. We did an episode only about cowboy vocabulary. That was episode 270. So go to inglespodcast.com/270. Where does the word buckaroo come from?
Vaquero, cowboy. It's kind of a type of cowboy. So the type of person who maybe makes a living in a rodeo show, I might call them a buckaroo. But I'm saying really a vaquero.
Conquistador is a word that we'd use in English, although it does only refer specifically to Spanish conquerors or conquistadores. So if you are a conqueror and you are Spanish, you're a conquistador.
What about the word Creole in English? What would that be in Spanish? Do you know?
Criollo?
Yeah, what does it mean for you, Creole?
Creole is a mixture of African and European language and culture. So you'd have Creole food and Creole culture, Creole cooking. That's kind of a fusion, a mixture of African and European. Is that what you'd say as well?
That's exactly what I'd think, yep. Another word we've got is matador, bullfighter. We've kept the word the same as Spanish.
What's the difference between a matador and a toreador?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I didn't know. I had to check.
I would say that only the matador is allowed to actually kill the bull, whereas
Exactly.
a toreador might not kill him.
Exactly. Of course, most bullfighters have to kill the bull at the end anyway. So toreador is actually dancing and playing with the bull, and the matador's killing it at the end. So most bullfighters are both.
Yeah. Although that word toreador, you might get off with it. That means you can maybe use it in English, but not many people would know that. They'd probably just say bullfighter for that one.
Yes.
Whereas we do know the word matador.
And in a related word, there's also picador, which means choose an exit.
Very good.
Picador.
Picador, that's
yeah,
good.
Choose an exit, you're leaving.
Many people might go to bullfights. Personally, I don't myself. Let's not get into that topic. And if they know a little bit about it, but not a lot, you could say they're aficionados. Yep, we've taken that word from Spanish, aficionado, and we apply our pronunciation. So if you know quite a lot about something, but you're not a professional, then you're an aficionado.
So would you say we are podcast aficionados?
I like to think we're professionals, to be honest. I think I started off as an aficionado, and I was an aficionado for a very long time when Craig was already a professional. But I think I could say I know what I'm doing now.
I think we are professionals, yes. There's a town in Mexico just northwest of Guadalajara called Tequila. Does that name ring a bell? Reza,
certainly does.
have you heard of tequila at all?
Not only have I heard of it, I've tasted it.
Do you like tequila?
I'm not a big fan of tequila. What about you?
I do. I love tequila, but I'm not very good at tasting the quality of different tequilas. And I know that there's some rough, cheap tequila that's not very good, and there's some really, really good, high, top quality tequila. I'm okay with malt whiskies to know if it's a good whiskey or a bad whiskey, I think. But with tequila, I'm not so sure, but I do like it, yeah.
Yeah, me too. Whiskey, by the way, a word which you got in Spanish, which you borrowed from us. Yeah, it goes the other way. Whiskey, which English borrowed from Irish and Scottish, by the way, which is whiskabea, the water of life. You see how words get borrowed from one language to another. Well, Craig, what does tequila mean?
It's named after the town where it came from, the town of Tequila. So I suppose it gets its name from the town where it originated. And it's northwest of Guadalajara on the Jaliscan Highlands, Los Altos de Jalisco, on the central western Mexican state of Jalisco. One day I would love to go there and taste some homemade original tequila in that area.
Craig, if I were to say to you in Spanish, ¿Dónde está el niño? It could mean something. But what if I...
Playing in the street?
Playing in the street, maybe. But what if I said to you in English, where is el niño? Now, what would that mean?
You're talking about the climate phenomenon?
Yes, el niño. So that word that you use in Spanish as well, obviously, we do say el niño in English, but it only refers to the climate phenomenon. It doesn't refer to all little boys. So el niño, which has affected the climate as a product of global warming and other things, we say el niño in English as well.
And if I said to you, where is El Gordo, would you say he's looking at me doing the podcast at the moment?
El Gordo?
Or would you confuse it with the National Lottery in Spain?
Yeah. English speakers are beginning to become aware of El Gordo Lottery. They're beginning to do it.
They are. Have you bought a ticket this year for El Gordo?
I haven't, but somebody bought one for me and won nothing. But I didn't.
Me neither. Let's leave you finally with a voice message from Mamin from Badajoz, Extremadura.
Hi Reza. Hi Craig. My name is Mamen from Badajoz, Extremadura. I love hearing a voice message in the last episode from my city, and at last I decided to send a voice message. I have listened you since the lockdown, and I'm improving my English. I love your podcast because it's funny and interesting. You make a good thing. As you know, Extremadura, a topic of your podcast, you could talk about it. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you very much for your voice message, Mamin. Do you fancy doing an episode on Extremadura? Is that something that interests you?
It very much interests me because, Mamin, I don't know if you've heard from previous episodes, me mentioning that I lived in Extremadura a long time ago for about a year. It was the first region of Spain that I lived in. Sorry to say, I didn't live in Badajoz. I lived in the arch-enemy province of Cáceres. I don't know if Craig knows, but even in Extremadura, there's rivalry. So it's the two provinces, Badajoz against Cáceres province. A bit like even here, it's Valencia against Alicante, against Castilla. They're always rivalry. But I love Extremadura. I've been in the province of Badajoz. I've been at a wedding in the province of Badajoz in a village. So I do know Badajoz and I love Extremadura, and I would love to do an episode about a place which means a lot to me. Yes, Mamin?
So keep listening, Mamin, and we will get to that topic as soon as we possibly can. Just one small thing about your message. You said, I have listened you. Better to say, I have been listening to you since the lockdown. And I would use the present perfect continuous because the focus is on the activity of listening. Use the continuous form when you're putting emphasis on the activity. I've been listening to you since the lockdown, and don't forget that preposition to with listen. And now it's your turn to practice your English. Can you think of more words that are used in English that come from Spanish or have Spanish roots? We have mentioned the more commonly used ones, but maybe you can think of more. We would love to hear from you. You can send us a voice message. Reza, what's the address for voice messages?
Voice messages go to speakpipe.com/Inglespodcast. Or, if you prefer to write, you could send us a comment or a question to our emails. You've got craig@inglespodcast.com or me, belfastreza@gmail.com.
And we invite you to go and look at the products available on the Mansion Inglés website. Go to store.mansioningles.net. And if you find this way of listening to audio to improve your English, we have 4 separate levels of audio courses for sale, and the price is €9.99 per level. So you might be interested in checking that out. Again, that's store.mansioningles.net.
As always, we'd like to thank all of you who are helping us by supporting this podcast through the Patreon scheme. You can see a list of all our Patreon supporters at Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/EnglishPodcast. We haven't got time to say all those names, but we will say a big thank you to our most recent supporters who've joined this month, who are Christian Garcia Magro, Raquel Sanchez, Perry Crespi Cabot, Antonio Murillo, Luis Lobo Martinez, Marina Rueda, Beatriz, and Josep Girvant.
Thank you to all of you for supporting us. You can join our Patreon program at patreon.com, patreon.com/English podcast. And on next week's podcast, we're going to speak about ways to express anger in English. Are you feeling angry? Well, you will be next week. Please join us for that episode. Until then, it's goodbye from Reza.
And bye-bye from Craig.
Thanks for listening. The music in this podcast is by Pitts, and the track is called See You Later.